Warning, we are not your attorneys. Please, don't take anything we say as legal advice. I'm Jeff.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Derek.
And you are listening to the Not So Grand Jury,
which is still sponsored by Morwa PLLC. Hey everybody, future editor Derek here. We have a sort of unique sidebar coming to you today, and I wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up as to what you're about to hear. So we recorded a couple weeks ago on May 20th, a quick sidebar on listener feedback, which we had released as Sidebar 20. And as part of that, we were going to include a sort of what we'll call a new segment, which can only be described as yelling into the void, where Mike and Jeff, and maybe eventually I, essentially complain about things that are happening in the world, or at least bring up some interesting sort of legal things that are happening in real life. So it's not specific to the podcast, but it's certainly legal-ish. In this one, Mike focused on the settlement between Donald Trump, his family, and his entities, and the IRS, which had led to the $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund. And at the time, this had just been released. So last Friday, May 29, Donald Trump did not have a great day. Among other things, a judge put the anti-weaponization fund on hold. And then this past Monday, a different judge, actually the judge in the underlying case, reopened the case in response to a friend of the court brief that was filed by 35 former federal judges. So there's a lot of updates. Essentially what's going to happen is you're going to first hear our commentary and mostly Mike's introduction regarding the settlement and anti-weaponization fund. Then we're going to skip ahead in time to an updated conversation regarding that, where we talk about what's happened recently. And then we're going to go back in time and talk about something that Jeff had talked about, which was some litigation that's happening in the guitar world right now. Thankfully, nothing has changed that much that we need to do an update of that. So you're going to be getting this in 3 parts, and I will be giving you brief intros to each one. So first, let's start with our conversation regarding the settlement that happened a couple weeks ago.
We should say, this is not something we normally do. We're trying this out, but also we're going to talk about 2 different topics. Mine is not as
depressing.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, so for those of you who are listening and just wanted to listen to actual podcast stuff about TV shows and movies, you can stop listening now. For those of you who are very interested in the stuff that Jeff and Mike want to talk about, feel free to stay on. I'm sure it's going to be an interesting conversation. We're going to want you to have comments and other things. But the world is weird right now. Mike, talk about the stupidest, most ridiculous settlement that's ever existed, ever. Although I will note, in live time, apparently there's already been a challenge to it from the police.
Yeah,
officers.
so there's several lawsuits have been filed. I don't think we're in a place to judge how good any of them are.
Do me a favor and set the scene.
So Donald Trump, several years ago, had his tax returns leaked. If you guys remember, he's the first major presidential candidate to not release his tax returns. He said he was going to release it after the IRS was done their audit. He said that in 2015, still waiting. As a result of having his tax returns leaked and all the emotional harm he suffered, he sued the IRS, which he's not the head of the IRS, but the IRS is in the executive branch and he's the head of the executive branch, so he functionally is the head of the IRS. He sued the IRS, the organization that he's in charge of, for $10 billion, because that seemed like a reasonable amount of money. The judge that was handling the case early on said, I'm not sure if there's a case in controversy here, so why don't you brief that? The briefs were due today. So before they had to submit a brief that probably would have destroyed their case or likely, had a good shot at breaking their case, and said Donald Trump settled with himself for $1,776,000,000.
Yes, 1776.
Because he's a real American. It's supposed to be distributed to people who were victims of the Biden weaponization of the White House,
The Justice
the
Department, right?
Justice Department. Yeah,
This thing that did not happen, but is happening now.
yeah. There's going to be no process here. There's no. He gets to appoint who distributes the money. He can dismiss them at will, no cause needed, and the money's like there's not going to be a record of this, or at least there's not. They don't want there to be a record. So he could give all the money to his kids. He could give all the money to the worst January 6th rioters. That's probably who it's actually going to matter. I don't know who it's going to actually go to. He could give it all to a trust that just pays him out. Like there's no reason that it couldn't go to the worst people in the world. If there were an issue where you wanted to pay reparations for something bad that the government did, there's a process to do that. You could go to Congress. You could, come up with a trustee that pays it out. There's ways that you could do this in a way that would be fair and equitable. They don't want that. They want to use this as a war chest to incentivize people to behave badly, to incentivize people to do the things that they want to do that may or may not involve insurrection or just, out and out corruption. This is the most corrupt thing I'm going to rant about this. I get really fired up about this. This is the most corrupt White House in American history. This is the most corrupt thing they've done. Like, that's actually impressive. It's like when you start going through some of the most corrupt acts, foreign dictators have done, $1 billion is a lot. Like, there's only a handful of times that we're aware of that, like, a foreign dictator has taken more than $1 billion from their country. This is like up there as among the most corrupt acts any head of state has ever done. I don't know if you guys have any Trump people in your life. I do. I have my parents both voted for him. I cannot understand this. This drives me nuts that people are not more outraged about this.
It is. I remember pretty clearly when during the 2016 campaign, it was a scandal that Eric Holder met with Bill Clinton on, at an airport, like on a tarmac.
It wasn't Eric Holder. It was Letitia
yes,
James.
It was his successor.
Yep. I understand what you're saying, though. It was Loretta Lynch? Yeah.
Okay. Since we both came to the same name, I'm going to assume that's right. And that was a scandal because the Attorney General is supposed to be, independent of the president or a potential president. And rightly, that was a problem. That happens basically once a week now, if not more frequently. And like we have now Watergate level scandals essentially at once a month.
A couple of directions I want to go here. Trump is not the first person that had their tax returns leaked. Ken Griffin, the billionaire. So
The
yes,
name sounds familiar, but
all right. He had his tax returns leaked. He sued the IRS. Can you guess how big his settlement was?
$2 million.
It was an apology. It was $0 an apology.
Okay.
Because Ken Griffin, the greedy billionaire, is not that greedy. Not Trump greedy.
Thinking of, is it Ken Griffey Jr.? He's a baseball player, right?
Yes, but different people.
I have no idea who Ken Griffin is.
Ken Griffin, he's in the news a lot in New York because he's saying he's going to leave New York because of Mamdani. It's a whole other thing. But I don't want to defend him in any way. I'm not trying to speak up for him in any way. But he's not as greedy as Trump.
The very fact that the settlement is for $1,776 million.
Yes, it means that it's not related to the damages.
It's unrelated to anything, and also means that this was not a case in controversy. So a fundamental tenet of our justice system is that courts do not hear things that are like either advisory opinions or where there is not an actual case in controversy. This is part of Article 3 of the Constitution that establishes our system of courts, or at least the Supreme Court and whatever inferior courts that Congress may choose to create. And that means that there has to be an actual dispute between two parties at odds with each other. And that is not the case here. And the fact that the settlement amount is what it is and is purely symbolic is a massive piece of evidence that this is not a case in controversy. And I have to hope that the judge in this case, well, I should say the judge in this case has the authority to reject that settlement. And I hope that they do. I don't know who the judge is, but they have that authority. Whether or not on appeal, the Supreme Court might give its stamp of approval to this stupid thing and set some really terrible precedent is not outside the realm of possibility, but I have to hope that they would see the massive door that they'd be opening if they allowed that. But I've been proven wrong by this court before, so yeah.
One more note. Part of the settlement protects Donald Trump and his family from being investigated for other financial crimes.
I think I saw like a Blue Sky post about this, but didn't have time to dive into it or the inclination, quite frankly.
Eric, as the moderator, will give you the exact quote. The United States releases, waives, acquits, and forever discharges each of the plaintiffs from and is hereby forever barred and precluded from prosecuting or pursuing any and all claims, counterclaims, causes of action, appeals, or requests for any relief, including injunctive relief, monetary relief, damages, examinations, or similar or related reviews, appeals, debt relief, costs, attorney's fees, expenses, and or interest, whether presently known or unknown, that as of the effective date of the settlement agreement have been or could have been asserted by defendants against any of the plaintiffs or related or affiliated individuals, including, without limitation, family or others jointly filing, or parties including trusts, parents, sisters, or related companies, affiliates, and subsidiaries, by reason of, with respect to, in connection with, or which arise out of any matters that were raised or could have been raised in the case or the pending agency claims, lawfare and or weaponization as they are defined, or any matters currently pending or that could be pending before defendants or other agencies or departments.
So the good news there is that means that they can't audit Donald Trump anymore, so he'll release his tax returns now.
Obviously. That's what
I see only good news here.
The most I can say for that is it only seems to encompass things that could have been raised in this proceeding.
So yes, it's tax crimes. It's him not paying his taxes, which we all assume Donald Trump is not paying his taxes.
And it's also not in perpetuity for forward-looking things they might do.
Although it is him pardoning himself. It is a settlement where he's...
Again, one more reason why this is not...
Now, allow me to ask a question. Is this worth the piece of paper it's fucking written on?
Is it worth $1.7 billion?
Is it worth the 3 cents on the paper in some ways? Because I've had this conversation with my clients. This brings a sort of, I'm going to bring up my sort of practice into this, which is I have read agreements where the other side refuses to budge on a specific provision or an overarching issue. And there is a part of me that says, yeah, let's agree to it. No court is ever going to agree to it. What do we have here? Because as I understand it, yes, you can come up with settlement agreements and you can agree to certain things. Let's just look at it from the perspective it is. Trump is agreeing with himself in many ways. The private version is agreeing with the official public version. There's no scenario in my brain where that is legitimate, except to potentially 6 of the Supreme Court justices. Is that the worry?
I mean,
is that the whole worry? Is that the whole worry? Because in my brain, there's got to be a way where this gets overturned.
I don't know. So I feel like, and the lawsuit I haven't seen yet is I don't think anyone in Congress is yet suing over this, which maybe I missed that, but that would...
Congress is still trying to figure out what the fuck just happened. I mean...
Yeah, but we knew this was coming. We knew this was coming weeks ahead of time.
Well, and as we all know, the Democrats are...
I understand. We can criticize the Democrats here.
Know what they're doing.
That would seem to be the party that should sue. Right now, the lawsuit I was reading before this was the cops who survived January 6th, which I appreciate. Yes. They seem like decent people. I'm glad that they're fighting this, but it seems like the people that have standing would probably be Congress, because you're giving $1 billion of taxpayer money to people who have no right to receive it.
Right, for something that was not earmarked for.
Yeah.
It has no oversight.
In my opinion, the 3 of us have more standing to sue on this shit settlement because it's our taxpayer dollars at issue than he had to sue originally.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And if the Supreme Court hadn't eviscerated taxpayer standing, we might have a case to make there. But they said to be clear for our listeners, the Supreme Court has said specifically that essentially the executive branch, when it has funds that it can spend at its discretion, can spend those in ways that violate people's rights. And still the people who paid that money, the taxpayers, do not have standing to challenge it because it was not specifically laid out in statute by Congress that the funds had to be spent that way. It's really dumb. It's more of a case in controversy than the actual case here. Yeah.
So we're all really happy about this, as the listeners can tell.
All right. So obviously you heard the excitement in our voice back then. We are now going to flash forward a couple weeks to an updated version of this conversation.
And here's what's funny, and I want Mike to talk about it. Basically, everything he said 2 weeks ago has kind of been updated. So, Mike, take it away.
Okay. So I'm, again, not sure exactly where this is going to get put in, but there's two main lawsuits the two main legal actions working their way through the courts related to the settlement. First, in Virginia, the litigation is directly aimed at stopping the fund itself, the $1.776 billion. A former January 6th prosecutor brought a suit to block the anti-weaponization fund. The U.S. District Judge temporarily froze any payments while she considers the challenge. Other reporting says that Capitol Police officers, there's another lawsuit by Capitol Police officers who are also challenging the fund, in part because of concerns that the January 6th defendants or Trump allies could receive payments. The Virginia case seems to be strictly about the fund, whether the executive branch can set up this fund, who could control it, whether the claims could be paid without proper oversight. There's a second legal action happening with Judge Kathleen Williams, who was the one handling the original lawsuit between Donald Trump, the president, and the IRS headed by Donald Trump. Williams is looking at the settlement itself, and that's more of a structural proceeding. A group of retired federal judges asked her to reopen or review the case, arguing that the settlement may have included collusion or fraud on the court. And the argument is basically that Trump and the federal agencies he controls may not have been truly adverse parties. I don't know how either of these cases is going to work out. It does give me a little bit of hope that these cases are happening. And I think there's reporting that Todd Blanche went in front of Congress yesterday and said that the fund itself is not going to go forward. I don't trust Todd Blanche at all. I wouldn't believe him if he told me the sky was blue. But I think that there is some significant pushback coming from Congress and coming from the courts on this. If I were going to give my 2 cents on what I think is going to happen, or what I think the Trump administration is trying to do, is they're trying to get people to back off and maybe push this through after the midterm elections when there'll be a little bit less pushback, is what I think what they're hoping for. That said, that gives me some hope that maybe, either the court in Virginia or the court in Florida could slow walk the ever-living fuck out of this and just not let payments go through for the next 6 months. And hopefully we have a new Congress by then, and that would solve some of the problems.
I just want to note, I mean, you say slow walk it, but it's currently June. Yep. Elections are in November. I mean,
my fear is that they would push it through immediately after November.
Sure. I'm saying, that a 5 months of the courts sitting on this is pretty standard.
Last I looked, the payments are only I think it was June 12th. Yeah. Judge Williams ordered Trump's lawyers to respond by June 12th.
Okay.
And I think the payments are also frozen until right around then also.
Did any of this get paid out? My understanding is none. Okay.
The Guardian is saying no payments have yet been made. That is a day or two old. I think that the courts will be successful in holding that off. I think if they want to slow walk this, they can. Not sure how likely that is. The sense I'm getting is probably I'm a little bit more pessimistic in this case. I think that there's a reasonable chance that this money does get used for its purposes, maybe more so than you guys are.
I mean, I'm not optimistic, but I'm withholding judgment for the moment to see how the court proceedings go.
What do you think the odds are that this money gets dispersed? If you had to put a number on it.
Oh boy. Gets dispersed as Trump intended?
Something relatively close to that original settlement we saw.
Okay, because something close to the original settlement we saw, the 1776.
Yeah.
I'm going to say 0.
Hmm.
I think if there is a settlement, which there very well could be, I think it'll be much less than that. And I also think that there are going to be some conditions put on it that were not in the settlement agreement between DOJ and Trump that could mean that the money is not necessarily dispersed in as partisan a fashion as it initially might. Because frankly, I could see, SPLC has been sued by this administration for stupid stuff, and maybe they should be entitled to some of this money. In right now, the Council on Islamic American Relations is being sued, or is suing, Texas and Florida because they are weaponizing their government agencies against that nonprofit organization. And if the federal government followed suit, I could see them wanting, there is weaponization of the justice system going on. It's just not going on in the direction that they're claiming.
I should also note that there is some reporting that even if the fund does not go forward, the audit immunity part of it, they still want to pursue that, which is also incredibly corrupt.
I was going to say that, this is specific to the funds.
Yeah.
According to my understanding is that Blanche's testimony said they were going to still move forward with every other aspect of the settlement.
Which is
still problematic.
Insane. It's problematic is putting it lightly. It's insane that the president would pardon himself,
And
that his family, every associate he's ever had. The language is incredibly broad, protects them from this family's. It's very obvious that they've at least done some kind of tax shenanigans, and that's
right. If that weren't the case, we would have had his tax records in 26.
Completely insane. Also, that's the part that I like. DOJ has wide latitude to settle cases, just like as a rule, they have money does not need to be appropriated for it. They have wide latitude usually to settle these things. Usually the assumption is that DOJ is operating in good faith and not trying to bribe the president.
Sure.
The one part of the settlement that was always on legally shaky ground, even if it weren't let's pretend Donald Trump weren't president, but he sued the IRS and they made sign the same settlement. The part of it that's most shaky even then is the IRS audit. I don't know if DOJ can tell the IRS not to audit somebody, can blanket waive every possible audit for, it was every year prior to 2026. I don't know if they have that authority. I think that's the part that was always the weakest and subject to, I don't know if the next DOJ has to respect that settlement.
It's actually an interesting point. The DOJ represents the IRS in court, right? Because the DOJ kind of represents every government organization for the most part in court, but it doesn't necessarily have the unilateral legal authority to permanently bind the IRS. Since the IRS is, it's got statutory duties to enforce the tax code, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that the DOJ can bind something, especially if it goes against a federal statute that requires the IRS to do something.
Right. They couldn't bind the IRS to go against a statutory obligation, but if it's a prosecutorial discretion question, then I can see that the IRS through their representatives could agree to be bound by that.
Isn't there certain settlements so if you were in tax court, this obviously is in tax court, but I know if you're in tax court, there's a procedure by which the IRS will agree to a settlement, and once you've agreed to that settlement, then it becomes binding on everybody, and they can't reopen a tax liability that they've agreed to close.
Sure.
But that can't have happened here for obvious reasons.
It's also unclear to me whether a settlement between the government here and and let's say a private party which in the scope of this lawsuit, Trump is a private party, can agree to a settlement that binds the IRS as to people who have nothing to do with the lawsuit, i.e.,
well, I mean, that's
all of
every
Trump's
part of this. Yeah.
on.
I mean, this, also the fund.
The fund
is-
too, yeah.
Yeah.
What comes to mind immediately for me, for probably obvious reasons, is was it Alex Costa, the Florida
you're talking about the
AG
Epstein
who entered into
Yeah.
the settlement agreement with Epstein, the non-prosecution agreement that was then invalidated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have seen the Justice Department or its equivalents or its state level equivalents like go back on these kinds of things before when there is justification. Sometimes when there's not justification, but it wouldn't be unheard of if the next administration is like, this is not valid. We are going to operate as if it is not valid.
I expect either way. Like, it's going to be a big fight in court, and I'm interested to see how that works. But yeah, it is. It's not good, guys.
No, I don't think anyone thought it was good. It was just a question of how long it was going to take for at least for there to be enough pushback for the Trump administration to at least not keep going forward. That honestly didn't take too long.
No, it's one of those, and like, it seems like one of the more indefensible things that he has done. So I would be interested to see what some of the other people would say about it. I don't think it's going to be popular. I'd love to see some polling on how it performs.
I've tried to listen to some conservative commentators on this, and even some of them are just not taking it up for the moment.
Well, that's usually what happens. Is like the good faith, the National Review people, or the people that like are supposed to be the intellectuals. Like, if it's really indefensible, they just won't talk about it.
Right. Or you get generic statements like, I've never been a fan of slush funds in general, but without talking about the actual specifics of the ridiculousness of this one. And like, listen, we don't have to get into all of them. There is a lot of constitutional issues if this were to ever make its way down and actually have money sent out, because for a lot of reasons we discussed, there's also just like certain things that just don't make sense. The 14th Amendment, barring the use of federal resources to reward rebellion or insurrection comes to mind. Sure. For example, the fact that the president's, barred from receiving any other emolument from the United States beyond his fixed compensation. This seems to be a direct compensation to the president of the United States. So, Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution makes it pretty clear you can't get that. Now, let's get into a whole thing about how he's rewarding himself in other ways. This is actively becoming more and more direct.
In the first term, people tried going after him on the emoluments thing, and the public just didn't latch onto it. We haven't exercised that muscle. Like, every president before this was not this corrupt, this brazen. So we never got to the point where we thought we would impeach a president because of an emoluments violation. So most people don't know what emoluments are. Like, it's going to take a big civic education effort to bring people up to speed on why this is despicable.
I don't have the information in front of me, so maybe we'll have to edit this out, but I believe there's actually a new emoluments thing going on where there's actually, so the problem back in the first term when he was getting, financial benefits from all sorts of things, his hotel, golf courses, whatever, is that no one really had standing to challenge any of that. There's now a situation arising where someone does have standing and is pursuing a lawsuit challenging some of his actions, not on the emoluments front, and it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. Just to circle back, the emoluments case that I was talking about is Governor DeSantis has attempted to, it's not being challenged, has attempted to gift some land from Florida for the Trump Presidential Library. And the people that were supposed to have use of that land have challenged it under the emoluments clause.
And now we're going back in time to listen to Geoff talk about some litigation, or at least some threatened litigation that is happening in the guitar world.
So, Geoff, can you talk about something more fun, slightly?
Sure. So a thing has been making its way around GuitarTube.
Ooh, I'm excited for this. I didn't even know this was the direction we were going in.
Is unbelievable. So a little bit of background. Just a little bit of background to explain why this is of interest to me. And I'll say, so this is about Fender going completely off the rails in a legal sense. Fender, the guitar maker. And I want to say up front, because there is a lot of, there's Taylor players and Martin players and Gibson players and Fender players. I was never anybody who had like school spirit. I don't care about, like, there are brands that I don't like and won't buy from. I won't buy Apple. I won't buy Microsoft, anything. There's those kinds of things, but I don't really have brand loyalty. I have more brand disloyalty than anything else. So I don't have a dog in this fight. I don't own a Fender guitar of any Fender equipment of any sort. I don't own Gibson guitars of any sort. So just putting that out there. I also am I've always had sort of a do-it-yourself bent. This mostly presented in the computer space. I've been building computers with my dad since like 1992, since like third grade, which is also part of why I don't buy Apple or Microsoft anymore. Anyway, so a couple of years ago, I started going through what one of my friends, it might have been one of the two of you, I don't remember, called the tamest midlife crisis ever. I took up guitar lessons and woodworking. And there's a nice intersection between those two, because an electric guitar is just a slab of wood with some strings on it and some wires inside. And it turns out I'm not trying to downplay the artistry of guitar making, but making a functional guitar is actually very simple. So I've been making guitars, not many. I've made all of one complete guitar so far. I'm almost done with the second. I have two others that are in various stages of physical form, but not anywhere near done yet. Anyway, so that's my interest here. Yeah. So Fender has sent a letter to numerous small guitar makers ordering them to stop making certain kinds of guitars as infringing on their IP. Now, a little bit more background, but this time about the guitar industry. In general, there are certain things in a musical instrument that you can protect as your own intellectual property. There's your logo, your name, the name of the model and brand. On a guitar, this is usually in the form of the headstock of the guitar, where the tuning pegs are, generally bears the logo, and the physical design of the headstock is unique to each manufacturer because it's something that is largely not functional. It is aesthetic. And so a part of what is otherwise a functional piece of equipment where they can inject some creativity in something that they can actually own in terms of IP. And so for as long as there has been electric guitars, and I think as long as there have really been guitars and IP law, you can hold trademark in your headstock, your logo, the name of the model, the name of the brand. The shape of the body of the guitar is generally not. There are exceptions to this, where the design is, where aspects of the design are aesthetic and in no way functional. It can be protected. Like the Prince guitar, if anyone knows what I'm talking about, it's this like massive, ostentatious purple thing that Prince had specifically made for him, virtually none of which is meant for function. That is something that you can have intellectual property rights in. And interestingly, Fender, from when it created the Stratocaster, and when it created the Telecaster and the Jazzmaster, Jaguar, all these classic electric guitars, did not even attempt to register the shapes of those guitars as trademarks with the USPTO, the Patent and Trademark Office. They only tried to register those trademarks in 2003. 49 years after they first created the guitars that they were then trying to trademark. And because Fender didn't trademark these, the bulk of the guitar industry, the electric guitar industry, used the Stratocaster as a basis for their designs. They're called S-type guitars. If you go and try and buy a guitar, there are T-type guitars, S-type, ES-type, all these different like broad styles of body shapes. And the Stratocaster sort of broad outline is kind of the generic concept of what an electric guitar looks like now, because Fender didn't trademark it. It is the generic concept of an electric guitar. If you pull up your emojis on your phone and search for a guitar emoji, it is a Stratocaster because it is not trademarked. They can just use that image and not have to pay licenses or anything like that. When Fender tried to trademark these, the trademark office said it was challenged, first of all, by a bunch of guitar makers. And the trademark office said, no, first of all, you've waited this long, it's generic now. Second of all, I pulled up the exact language. So product configurations. This is true of things other than guitars. Like Apple tried to trademark the just rounded rectangle shape so that no other phone maker could use a rounded rectangle as their phone shape, which didn't fly. Product configurations, quote, are not inherently distinctive and may only be registered as marks upon a showing of acquired distinctiveness, and they can only be acquired after periods of long exclusive use, which Fender didn't do. Fender sat on their right. They could have, presumably, tried to trademark this back in the 50s. They didn't. So, in the United States, the Stratocaster design is essentially public domain. And anybody can use it to sell guitars in the US. And I'm going to limit that by saying in the US because, of course, the US Patent and Trademark Office doesn't govern anybody but the US market. So, in 2025, last year, Fender sued a Chinese maker of counterfeit Fender equipment of various types, like individual Fender necks, bodies, whatever, things with the Fender logo and their other marks that were not actually genuine Fender products. Which, by the way, is entirely within Fender's right. And importantly, they sued them for violating their trademarks in the names of their brands and the headstock shapes. At no point in this suit in the US did they sue over the use of the shape of a Stratocaster or a Telecaster or anything else. And the court there sided with Fender. Again, this was a default judgment. They were suing some fly-by-night manufacturer of counterfeit guitars in China. Of course, they're not going to show up. Of course, it's going to be a default judgment. Fender won that rightfully because those were things that they did have trademarked and that did appear to be violated.
By the way, for the listener, when you get a default judgment, if the other side doesn't show up after being served appropriately, it is sort of assumed that your allegations are correct. They are no longer allowed to sort of come back and say, "Oh, your allegations were false." Like, it is presumed true, which means that a lot of times a default judgment is not used in other cases in any reason because it's a default. It is one side's opinion.
And the next person you try and sue for it could show up and present their argument, and nothing precludes them from doing that. Because in the first case, the court only got one side of the argument. In the way a grand jury only hears the prosecution side before, deciding to indict someone. So that happened last year. It was decided, I think, in January in the US. At the same time, they were doing the same thing in Germany. They had presumably an employee or someone in Germany purchase on AliExpress a counterfeit Fender thing and sued on the same grounds in Germany, but they also added, I guess, the German equivalent of a copyright claim. Let me mention right now that I tried to find a copy of the actual decision from the German court. I wasn't even able to find a German language version of it. I'm not sure how I would have translated it into English, but I was hoping I could at least find something. Couldn't. But nevertheless, it seems clear from what has happened since that they did include essentially a copyright claim, which is different than a trademark claim or a patent claim. And interestingly, Leo Fender, the guy who founded Fender, only, as far as I can tell, patented one actual guitar. I'm not sure why he chose to only patent one of them, but, well, who knows? We're not going to get into like patent law because none of us are patent attorneys. None of us, by the way, are specialists in IP law. I do because I'm general counsel for a company. I have examined IP law in terms of, trademarks and things like that, because you have to police trademarks. If you do not police a trademark, meaning if you do not try and enforce it when someone violates it, you lose it, much like Fender did in the US. So, this German court was, again, a default judgment where they've said, okay, the other side didn't show up, Fender, you win this case. And I want to borrow a little bit of the language. I want to read to you a little bit of the language because something to do with copyright law is that copyright is meant to protect like artistic works of, intellectual creativity, essentially. And I want to read a bit of how Fender describes the creativity that went into the Stratocaster design. In 1954, I'm just quoting now. In 1954, the company's founder, Leo Fender, created an electric guitar called the Stratocaster. Inspired by the futuristic tail fins of the Cadillacs and Mustangs popular at the time, and by the appeal of feminine curves, Leo Fender developed a unique body shape through a lengthy creative process involving drawings and hands-on experimentation with wood using grindstones and similar tools. The Fender Stratocaster body is designed as follows, blah, blah, blah. Let me just pause for a moment. Guitars are vaguely shaped in a womanly way. They have curves because of acoustics. If you overlay a Stratocaster on a standard acoustic guitar, they are nearly identical. There are basically two differences, and that is it's what's called a dual cutout design, and that on either side of the neck it scoops inward to allow you to reach the high frets to do the like crazy solos and things like that, which is a functional change to the guitar and not something that is like copyrightable. Also, because it's a functional thing of the guitar, isn't trademarkable either. Regardless, Fender has taken this win, and their attorneys in Germany call this a landmark decision, by the way, this default judgment that they got, that isn't applicable to anybody else, even in the US. In Germany, the EU is what's called a civil law jurisdiction, and we talked about this fairly recently. A civil law jurisdiction is quite different than what we have in the US, which is a common law jurisdiction. In common law jurisdictions, there's something called stare decisis, which is a fancy Latin term for prior decisions govern later decisions. I'm not going to do a direct Latin translation because I don't have it in front of me. But essentially, it is where precedent comes from. They don't have that in civil law jurisdictions, just by virtue of the way civil law jurisdictions work. So this case, even if it were an actual, like, not default judgment, decided on the merits, judicial opinion would not be binding on anyone else. It would just be binding on the parties in that case. So, Fender's attorneys in Germany proceeded to, when they got this decision, by the way, Fender was like, we're not going to use this to like be bullies or abuse guitar makers or anything like that. We just, we have to deal with these counterfeits. All right. So they sent a letter to at least one U.S. manufacturer of guitars where making Stratocaster-shaped guitars is fine, and a bunch of European guitar makers, demanding, among other things, that they recall any S-type guitar they've ever sold. There may have been a timeline attached to it. I don't know. I haven't, again, been able to find a copy of this letter beyond what I've been able to piece together from various screenshots in YouTube videos and articles. Anyway, recall all S-type guitars sold in the EU, cease manufacture of S-type guitars, which, again, are completely legal to manufacture in the United States, pay a fee of 250,000 euros to Fender per offense, which in US dollars is $290,686.25. Also pay just the attorneys a roughly 3,000 euro and change fee for the trouble of writing the demand letter, and destroy any existing stock you have of S-type guitars that you have on hand. This is bizarre. There are theories running around that what they're trying to do is force people to go into licensing agreements, and we'll pay a fee to license the Stratocaster body. I hope that no guitar manufacturers bend to their will on that. They have managed to piss off Fender fanboys and Fender haters and everybody in between with this, because what the hell? It is there. And yeah.
Here comes a question, because as I understand it, and I don't know, I did a little bit of research when you brought this to our attention, Geoff. It sounds like Fender tends to be pretty aggressive when it comes to this kind of stuff, like generally.
Yes, but with their headstock designs and their logos, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. But this is just now going to a step of insanity. Yeah. Are they just trying to piss everyone off?
So I've heard, I don't think that's what they're trying to do. So what's going on in the guitar making industry, and let me say, like, when I say I make guitars, like, I make them for me. My goal is to never buy an off-the-shelf guitar. I would just rather make it myself because I can. I have no intention of entering the guitar making business, so I just want to mention that. But the guitar making market is not great right now, essentially because there was a huge boom in 2020 thanks to COVID. And there was suddenly this huge demand. The big companies, Fender, Gibson, Martin, Taylor, ramped up their productions because everyone wanted these now and they had to shove them out the door. And then as soon as COVID ended, it kind of fell through the floor. Fender had to lay off like 300 people because they didn't plan for the fact that the pandemic would eventually end. And it is very difficult to sell new guitars now. It is very difficult to sell off a used guitar to just a store because everyone who thought during COVID, well, I'll pick up a guitar, and now they're done with it, is done with it and is trying to sell them all. So there is a glut of used guitars on the market. So Fender is hurting. The Stratocaster itself used to account for 36% of either the electric guitar or the guitar market in the United States. Now, Fender in total accounts for 30%. I don't know if that's now or like maybe that was in 2020. I don't have the statistic in front of me. So needless to say, like, their market share is shrinking and the market is shrinking. So
I feel like the people that they would be after to buy their guitars are now going to be like, kindly screw yourself.
That's kind of what's happening at the moment. Yeah. The question is whether these companies will resist entering into license agreements to continue producing the guitars that they're already producing, that I believe they're entitled to produce entirely, or go to the expense of litigating this. Because,
I mean, so you said they've sent a bunch of cease and desist. Do we have any indication that they've actually gone forward and filed stuff?
No, nothing yet.
Okay.
And a number of guitar makers have posted like GoFundMes and various funding campaigns to be like, hey, we're planning to fight this. We need to make sure that we have the capacity to.
Like, especially the smaller manufacturers, I assume.
And notably, they haven't like Yamaha, probably the biggest musical instrument manufacturer in the world. I don't know. I haven't compared them, but Yamaha's a big one. They haven't apparently sent anything to Yamaha. So it seems like they are targeting the smaller people because, I think they want to pressure them into either entering into these license agreements or just not making S-style guitars anymore.
I think this goes to not just Fender being ridiculous, but it is, I see in my practice, and I'm sure you see it, Geoff, and probably Mike as well, like cease and desist letters that you know are just bullshit.
Yeah.
And the question was like, and I would hope they would have had this conversation. Like, do you know, are they coming from a law firm or internally?
It's Bird and Bird. So that's the German law firm that represented them in the default judgment case.
Okay. That is a very, it's interesting they would pay a law firm to send out all of those letters.
Yeah.
And again, maybe the goal is just to send the letters out, see what they get out of it, and then just sort of move on.
Of course, it doesn't cost them much to send 30 of the same demand letters.
Well, I was about to say, once you draft the letter, then it's just an act of sending
it's like
them,
mail
right?
merge and print as many as you want.
But the problem is, and I've said this to clients of mine who have asked me to send cease and desist letters, you got to follow up on them. You can't just send it and then move on. Because I've had scenarios where my clients have gotten cease and desist letters, I've responded, and then there's nothing. And I'm like, oh, that's adorable. Like, well, bark's a little bigger than the bite there, big dog. And all of a sudden there's just no response. It's like, oh, I see. All you needed was someone to respond with actual facts or actual law, and you now don't have anything. And that makes you look real weak if you were to ever do anything in the future. This is now public.
Yeah.
If they don't then respond with litigation or other things, they're going to look like little babies.
And I will note, none of us are EU attorneys. Derek, I know you and I know some attorneys in Europe. Mike, you may, I don't know. But I've heard third hand that the letters themselves may violate EU consumer protection laws.
Oh, fun. I forgot. Yeah, EU's got some intense ones. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Oh, jeez. That'd be, listen, it'd be hilarious just based on what you've told me that if they get dinged for this.
If anything, maybe this will lead to some more interesting guitar designs. Because I'll be honest, part of the reason that I want to make my own is because when I walk into a guitar store, it's like, okay, which candy colored thing do you want off the wall? And I don't want any. They all look boring.
They're all the same.
Save for
they all.
I really like the SG design, but again, I've never owned a Gibson. So
interesting. Yeah. Well, fun. Well, I want to keep following this because I'm now really curious what happens, and this is partially like me being a business attorney of like, what kind of advice are they getting? Are they actually going to follow up on it? Are they going to like make this a real thing, or is this just they've now screwed themselves?
They are the largest guitar manufacturer in the world, so they may just be hoping they can, Bigfoot everybody else. I don't know, but we'll see.
Yeah, but it seems like it's not happening. It seems like everyone's.
It does seem like everyone's pissed. Yeah.
Absolutely interesting conversation for those of you who have lasted this whole time. Thank you for listening, and obviously feel free to comment on any of your thoughts amongst the many things we discussed today. For purpose of the podcast, tell us more things you want us to talk about, or if anything we talked about today is something that you would want us to do, because if we get multiple people who are interested, we tend to do it. So thanks for listening.
Later, guys.
The Not So Grand Jury is sponsored by Morwa P. LLC.
The opinions expressed in the Not So Grand Jury are those of the hosts themselves and not of their respective employers.
The theme music for the Not So Grand Jury is from Gustav Holst's Jupiter and is in the public domain.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, if you want to suggest future movies, or even if you want to offer corrections, you can email us at notsograndjury@gmail.com or message us on any of our social media accounts.
The Not So Grand Jury is copyright 2026, all rights reserved.